The first is the one most people imagine when they hear the word: situational poverty. It doesn't build slowly. It arrives all at once. A car accident, a medical diagnosis, a layoff nobody saw coming. One event, and suddenly a household that was stable is not stable anymore. Researchers who study this call it precarity, the idea that a life can look completely fine right up until the moment it isn't. In the United States, studies have repeatedly found that a large share of adults could not cover an unexpected $400 expense without borrowing or selling something. $400. That is the width of the gap between stable and falling. Situational poverty is often temporary. People climb back out. But climbing back out requires something many people quietly do not have: a safety net, savings, family who can lend a hand. Take that away, and one bad month becomes one bad decade. The second kind is older, much older. It is called generational poverty, and it does not begin with an event. It begins with a birth. Sociologist Ruby Payne, who spent years studying this pattern, described it as poverty that has lasted at least 2 generations, long enough that it stops being a situation and starts being an inheritance. Children raised inside generational poverty are not just short on money. They are often short on something harder to measure: networks, role models in stable careers, the unwritten rules of how to navigate school systems, job interviews, and banks, rules that wealthier children absorb without ever being taught them directly. This is why generational poverty resists the advice people love to give: work harder, get a better job, save more. For someone inside a system with no scaffolding underneath them, that advice is like telling someone to climb a ladder that is missing half its rungs. The third kind isn't about how much money exists. It's about what that money can actually buy where you live. This is the difference between absolute poverty and relative poverty. And once you understand it, you start seeing the news differently. Absolute poverty is a hard floor. The World Bank defines it using a fixed threshold, currently a bit over $2 a day, below which basic survival itself becomes uncertain. Food, clean water, shelter, not comfort, survival. Relative poverty is different. It measures you against the people around you. A family in a wealthy country might have far more than someone living in absolute poverty on the other side of the world and still be considered poor because everyone around them has so much more that the gap itself becomes a form of exclusion. You can be housed, fed, and still poor because poverty, past a certain point, stops being about survival and starts being about distance. The distance between what you have and what your entire society has decided is normal. The fourth kind might be the most quietly devastating, because it breaks a promise almost everyone believes in: the promise that a full-time job is enough. Economists call this group the working poor, people who show up, clock in, do the job, 40 hours a week or more, and still cannot cover rent, food, and a medical bill in the same month. In the United States, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has tracked millions of workers who fall below the poverty line despite being employed for most of the year. This isn't a story about laziness. It never was. It's a story about the math not working, wages that have not kept pace with the cost of housing, jobs that offer no benefits, no sick leave, no stability beyond the next scheduled shift. You can do everything right and still lose. The fifth kind is invisible in a specific way. It hides behind geography. Rural poverty does not look like the image most people carry in their head: crowded tenements, city sidewalks. It looks like distance: a family living 40 minutes from the nearest hospital, a town where the one factory closed and never came back, a child whose nearest grocery store with fresh produce is an hour's drive away. Researchers studying rural poverty point to something specific: the absence of infrastructure that city dwellers never have to think about. Broadband internet, public transportation, job diversity. When the local economy depends on one industry and that industry leaves, an entire region can slide into poverty together, with nowhere nearby to absorb the shock. It's a poverty of isolation as much as income, and it's easy to miss because it doesn't cluster where reporters and researchers usually look. And the sixth kind hides in exactly the opposite place, in plain sight, inside the richest cities on Earth. Urban poverty exists in the shadow of extraordinary wealth, skyscrapers a few blocks from shelters, Million-dollar apartments a subway ride from families splitting one bedroom 3 ways. The scale of wealth nearby doesn't shrink urban poverty. In some ways, it sharpens it, because the cost of living rises to match the wealthiest residents, and everyone else has to survive inside prices they didn't set. This is why a family can be earning more money than their parents ever did, in absolute terms, and still be poorer relative to the city around them. The rent went up faster than the raise did. 6 kinds. 6 very different traps. Situational poverty knocks a stable life sideways in a single event. Generational poverty inherits itself, passed down like a birthmark nobody chose. Absolute and relative poverty measure the same gap from 2 different distances. The working poor prove that effort alone was never the whole equation. Rural poverty hides in distance. Urban poverty hides in plain sight, wrapped in a city that looks like it has everything. None of them are the same story, but they share one thing. Every single one of them is closer to you than you think, not because you are poor, maybe you are, maybe you're not, but because the line between stable and unstable is thinner than most people are told to believe. A car accident, a hospital bill, a factory closing 3 towns over, a single missed rung on a ladder nobody built evenly in the first place. Poverty was never one condition happening to other people far away for reasons that have nothing to do with you. It was always 6 different doors, and most of them are closer than you'd like to admit.